Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Blue View podcast. It's been a bit of a manic sort of situation lately. Obviously, we've had a few bad results and stuff, and we had a good result last game, but yeah, it's been a bit of a funny situation at Chelsea. So we thought we'd get on a returning guest. He's from the Athletic, Twomey. Do you want to introduce yourself? Very excited to have you on again.
Oh, good to be back. Thanks. It's been not been the quietest start to the new year on the Chelsea beat.
Yeah, it's been very interesting of late. Obviously, we've had lots of rumours about Lampard and lots of different things about on and off the pitch, really, his position. We've heard that maybe he could be going, maybe he will stay, maybe Abramovich will give him more time. We've heard things on the pitch as well, some interesting situations about formations and different things like that. Lots of debate going on. So really, guys, we're just going to answer your questions that you sent in today to Liam and get his answers, and then just sort of have a little discussion basically. So let's get into this then. So Liam, the first question is about Avraham Grant. Now, I'm not sure if you've seen Sky Sports News have been reporting tonight that basically he could be coming back as sort of like a backroom staff help for Frank Lampard. Do you know if this is sort of, is there any truth in this, or is it sort of just a rumour at this moment in time?
I can't say I've looked into this as of yet, so I can't say for certain whether it's true or not. What we do know is that the people that Abramovich leans on for advice in football matters, the people that get into his inner circle, tend to stay there for a long period of time, regardless of whether they've got an official title at Chelsea. So in between Gus Hiddink's two caretaker spells, he was someone that was regularly consulted on different things. And you had the old Dutch scout Pete de Visser as well, who's a key advisor for Abramovich. There are a handful of others, of course, and Avraham Grant has been in that circle for a long time. So I don't know whether it would be in any official role. I can't see him coming back as some sort of technical director or director of football, purely because I don't get any impression that Chelsea are going to hire anyone for that sort of position anytime soon. I mean, they appointed Petr Cech as technical and performance advisor with a view to him maybe growing into that role in the long term. So if Grant is going to be sort of advising Abramovich, it would probably be in a less formal capacity, because, I mean, to be honest, it would surprise me if that wasn't already happening, because Grant is someone that Abramovich has known and trusted for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting as well. One thing I was going to ask you your personal opinion about is that, people have been suggesting like Avraham Grant could maybe sort of come back and help Lampard, but then, if things go like really bad, do you think that there's a possibility at all that maybe Avraham Grant could become like an interim again? Because, we saw when Mourinho got sacked, got way back in the day, Avraham Grant didn't take over as manager at the start, but then he did eventually. So do you think there's any possibility that he could be an interim until the end of the season if things go really sour?
Well, I don't think you ever say never to anything, but it seems unlikely. Just because Grant has been out of the managerial game full stop for quite a long time now. What we do know is what we reported in the Athletic just after the Manchester City game, which is that Chelsea are actively talking about people that could that could do a better job with this group of players than Lampard. As far as we know, Grant was not one of those people mentioned, but they're talking more in terms of potential longer term options, people that could be available before the end of the season, could be available at the end of the season. There's lots of different things being discussed, but I would think that particular scenario, if I had to guess, is relatively unlikely. But it is only a guess at this point, because, like I said, I haven't looked into the latest noise around Grant.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It's something just to put out there anyway. So we're going to talk about more, you know, what you've basically been saying in the Athletic and discussing, obviously, Abramovich discussing different options and this and that a bit later. But we're going to move on to sort of Lampard now and some of the on the pitch decisions he's been making lately. So, Liam, the question that came in as well from one of our followers was, what are your thoughts on Lampard basically consistently playing the two number eights role? And it was in sort of, this question is directed, you know, with a view of someone wanting to find more about Havertz, basically, because most fans want to see him play as like a number 10, more forward in the box sort of thing. You know, we saw his goal against Morecambe where it was a header. He was very, very forward. You know, I mean, you actually put a tweet out, I think, saying that, you know, he's our best attacking, you know, at heading, apart from Giroud, our best attacker at heading. So, what do you think about Havertz's position at the moment? Do you think he should be playing as a 10? Do you think that Lampard should change the formation to accommodate him? Do you think that he should keep playing 8? Or, you know, what do you think? Because, you know, we do cross the ball a lot. And as you said, he is our best attacker at heading that's not named Giroud. So it's a bit interesting to me personally that he hasn't been playing more forward. What do you think?
Yeah. It's difficult because I think you look at Havertz's body of work at Leverkusen and his ability to arrive in the box at the right time, in the right position to get a scoring chance is arguably what he does best. That kind of moving without the ball. Funnily enough, in a kind of similar way to Lampard during his playing career. And so in order to maximise him, you definitely want to give him as many opportunities to do that as possible, regardless of what his starting position is. I think the difficulty that Lampard has right now, and the difficulty that any Chelsea coach would have, as nice a job as it is to manage a group of players as talented as this, there's not necessarily a clean fit between all of them into one system. So we know Havertz would like to play as a 10. He said at his unveiling press conference that's the position he sees for himself primarily. We know Werner would probably like to play more centrally rather than off the left. Most of Chelsea's wingers, barring Ziyech, would rather play off the left than the right. There isn't necessarily a system that accommodates all of those things. And so I think it's difficult. I do think generally Havertz has probably looked best as a number 10 this season, although he's had a couple of good games as a number 8. I think if you're going to play him as a number 8, you just need the midfield balance to be right. So he needs to be the midfielder who is given the most license to go forward. And then you really need a midfielder at the base who you know is going to mop up everything there. Kante has the ability to do that, but it's a bit of an adjustment for him. He hasn't generally played that role. Mount, I think, is fine playing a little bit deeper, not getting into the box as much and just doing more of an all-round number 8 job. I think he does that pretty well. So on paper, I think it can work, but you just need to make sure you're getting Havertz into those positions where he can impact final third, because I think if you're not, you're basically getting a very diluted version of what he is, and Chelsea certainly didn't sign him to be a diluted version of the player they saw at Leverkusen.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect answer, really. You know, something you mentioned was like, there's not really like a perfect system, is there? People want to play different positions. You know, it's very hard for Lampard. You know, it's easy for us to say as fans, I would like him here, would like him there, but Lampard's got to try and please as many players as he can and try and fit everyone in the best spots. So, you know, it's hard to do that. If Havertz plays as a 10, you know, what's our best pivot right now? We don't really have a destroyer in DM, you know, that can sort of mop things up. We have Kante, but, you know, what pivot do you play right now? If you play Havertz 10, do you play Mount deeper with Kante? You know, Mount has played deeper for England, but, you know, like, what do you do? There's so many interesting choices there. So I think that's a debate that can be continued at another time. So very, very good answer there from Liam about Havertz in the 10 position and in the 8 position. So, yeah, we're going to move off Havertz now and Lampard and more about the transfer window. So various people have asked us, Liam, what do you think Chelsea's plans are for Mark Gurhey, Sarr and Tomori? Who out of those three will be sort of who will stay, who will loan, and who will be sold, do you reckon?
So we're talking about next summer?
Yeah, so next summer, obviously, for
transfer window.
Sarr, and then maybe Twomey for this window.
Yeah, so I mean, at the moment, my colleague Simon Johnson's been doing a lot more of the reporting around Twomey's situation, and the latest we're hearing is that, well, clearly Lampard has been open about the fact that that there will be a loan for him this month. We just don't know where yet. But Simon has also reported that Twomey is open to a permanent move away from Chelsea, which I can completely understand given the way the last sort of 6 months have gone for him. And we've tried to get to the bottom of what exactly it is that has made him fall so far to the bottom of Lampard's centre back pecking order, and we haven't been able to find out the full story there. Maybe we will at some point. But it's a real shame as far as Twomey is concerned. I think at this point in time, it looks like at the very least his short to medium term future is away from Chelsea. We'll have to see what happens. You know, the irony is that after Lampard giving him his chance at Chelsea, his best hope of a Chelsea future might be if Lampard leaves and a new coach comes in and reassesses things and looks on him a little bit more favourably. The other two names you mentioned, Malang Sarr, I haven't really heard a lot about him in terms of Chelsea's plan at this point. He's not made a ton of appearances for Porto. I know he played a bit for them in the Champions League group stage, but I don't get the impression that he's playing every single week there. I think he was a kind of low cost development project, someone they saw who had a pretty high upside, but I'm not sure they acquired him with like a cast iron pathway into the first team squad. I think he's one of those players that will go into the loan system, and if he kicks on at Porto and then maybe somewhere else next year, then he can put himself into a position where, you know, he's in that conversation. We do know that Chelsea more broadly would value a left-sided centre-back, so I can understand why fans are talking about him. But I don't think he's necessarily on the radar just yet. And who was the other name you mentioned?
I mentioned Mark Gurr. He's had quite a good loan spell at Swansea. Yeah.
So Gurrey's been playing really well in the Championship. That loan I think that loan at the moment is everything that Chelsea hoped it would be for him. And of course, like Sarr, he's a left-sided centre back, which puts a little bit of a premium on him in terms of his skill set. My sense at the moment is that I think the ideal scenario would be Swansea get promoted, and then he can play with them in the Premier League next year, and that's the perfect step up in quality for him. For them, there's a lot of trust between Steve Cooper and Neil Bath and Jim Fraser at the head of Chelsea's academy. There are long-standing connections there, and so they trust him to look after Gurrey and manage his progression, similar to obviously Conor Gallagher in the second half of last season as well. So I'm sure they'll reassess depending on where Swansea are and what Gurrey people want come next summer. But right now, I'd say probably the ideal scenario for all parties would be Swansea get promoted and he goes up with them.
Yeah, I'm very, very excited about Mark Gurrey, to be honest. I think he's really good talent, very good on the ball, and looking forward to hopefully seeing him at Chelsea next season. So, or at least, fighting for a place. So anyway, we're going to hand over to Dubois now. He's got some more questions about Frank Lampard and also some managers and stuff, Liam. So Dubois, do you want to take over?
Yeah. So Liam, the first question comes in from one of our followers, and this one is more of a hypothetical. I think many Chelsea fans would hope that Chelsea's form turns around and obviously things look rosy again like they were a couple of weeks ago. But hypothetically, if, say, Frank Lampard was to be sacked, I know The Athletic, like you mentioned, reported that there were discussions going on already. But would you say that the likelihood is Chelsea would sort of continue with the sort of project manager sort of theme, like we're talking about the Hasenhüttls who took over at Southampton, or Nagelsmann, who at Leipzig, showing he's doing a great job? Or would you expect Chelsea to sort of revert back to the instant success sort of managers in that bracket, with talking about Allegri or Tuchel? And then there's another part to this question. There was talk in the media that Pochettino was an option for Chelsea before he went to PSG. Do you think that was a viable option if he didn't go to PSG?
Yeah. So first of all, we know for a fact that Chelsea really liked Pochettino. They obviously weren't the only top club that really liked Pochettino, and the fact that he was a free agent, I think, made him the kind of, sword of Damocles that was hanging over not just Lampard but Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at Man United and a few other big club jobs around Europe, because he is so widely respected for what he achieved at Tottenham. But the fact that he's now taken the PSG job, yeah, I mean, it changes the landscape in a significant way, not just for Chelsea but for any club, any top club that might be pondering a change at some point. But Chelsea will back themselves to attract a top manager to manage this group of players if they need to. They always have, and then they'll continue to do that. In terms of the project question, I think if you sack Lampard, particularly if you sack him sooner rather than later, I think it becomes quite difficult as Chelsea to sort of present to the outside world what they've been trying to present for the last year or so, certainly around that big transfer splurge in the last window, which is that this is a project that is led by a manager. If you sack Lampard at only a few months after he was on the phone to Kai Havertz and Timo Werner saying, "I've got a 3-year plan, guys, come here and be a part of it," I think it's pretty clear that the only project you can pitch is the Chelsea project, not the Lampard project or the insert manager's name here project. Players will have to be persuaded to come in to join the club rather than work for a specific manager, because you can't bank on any manager being there for the duration of your contract. But in terms of the type of manager they'll look for, it's quite difficult to say at this point. I can't go into detail about specific names they've talked about, but there is a fair amount of range in the names that have been discussed in terms of types of managers. So I think they are doing there is like a sort of proper due diligence. They are considering all possible options and the sort of good and bad points of all of them. But I can see why people would be talking about, like a lot of the German coaches that have been mentioned, because there does seem to be a club priority, doesn't there, to try and make sure that Werner and Havertz particularly, are maximised one way or another going forward. And there could be a logic to that. But they haven't decided on any one particular name, and there are a pretty wide range of coaches being considered.
Yeah, and I think especially the important point to mention was the fact that there's drawbacks to many of them and there's positives to many of them as well. So it's not sort of set in stone, and I think it is one where time will tell what happens, because the football industry, obviously results change the whole picture of everything. And after 3-4 results, we might be in a much worse position, or 4 results could make us look like this put us bad form behind us. So I think it's one where Chelsea fans will have to wait and see. But I think it's quite interesting, again, like Liam mentioned on the Pochettino one, who again differs opinions in the fan base, but it is good to know. So the second question, it's another follower who's asked about the situation regarding Lampard and how he's approaching the situation, and whether you think when you think Roman would decide is enough is enough. So in the sense that obviously in the media, Frank Lampard's sort of come across as sort of perhaps more calm about it, perhaps not pleading, but making note of the fact it's a project and that he is sort of instant success. And to be fair to him, he has maintained that stance from the start of the season when everyone was asking him whether Chelsea were title challengers, and he'd always be quick to dismiss the claims. But Is the way he's handling in the media, would you say that's sort of similar behind the scenes? Are Chelsea, in regards of Lampard, is he sort of remaining calm? And also, when do you think the final cut-off point would be from Roman to decide enough is enough? Is it a game-by-game basis? Would you say if we lose to Fulham, that sort of could cause Roman to make the decision?
Well, I think firstly on Lampard, I think he's conducted himself really in the only way that he can since all of this became a public conversation, or that since it became known that Chelsea are having these conversations. He's not shied away from the pressure. Honestly, everything we've heard from day one is that he knew the pressure was going to be there this season because of the money spent, because the fact that Chelsea weren't operating under a transfer ban anymore. He knew that there would be a kind of welcome to the real Chelsea job feel to this season, and that he would be given much less leeway. It's been a surprise to me personally how little residual goodwill seems to have carried over from last year, because I'm not saying he did an amazing job last season, but he did deliver top four in testing unique circumstances really, and got to an FA Cup final, which I know it was a bad look to lose to Arsenal, but if Chelsea had actually won the FA Cup, probably would have been ahead of schedule looking at the youth in this squad. So I'm a bit surprised that hasn't carried over more, and that it seems like the first time there's been a bad run, we began hearing really solid information from in and around the club that these conversations had started. As for the time frame, honestly, it's impossible to say. I mean, that we did not predict in the story that we ran after the City game when Lampard might be sacked, because it could be a day, it could be as far away as May. It could be, as you said earlier, football is a results business, and that was part of the reason why we waited until the end of the City game, because if Chelsea had beaten City, as well as being like a big result that could have made the story look a little bit silly, it could have actually materially changed the situation and reassured some people at the top of the club that maybe things weren't going in the wrong direction after all. So we know things can change very quickly, but the only thing I can say with confidence, or with some degree of confidence, is that we've got a lot of evidence from the Abramovich era that once these conversations about alternative managers begin, it tends to end with the manager leaving. Regardless of what the when is, it could be a few games time that Roman decides to pull the trigger. It could be at the end of the season, but once these conversations are happening, it only tends to end one way. And I think Lampard knows that he's got an uphill challenge at this point, but he's saying all that he can in public. He's going to fight for this job. He knew it was early to take the Chelsea job, but he took it because it was a great job and he loves Chelsea. So he's going to fight for it until the last possible moment.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you've said there, and I think especially the fact that I guess there's two perspectives to it as well. And it's a similar divide in the fan base as well. I think there's some who would look to the last season, like you said, and what he achieved last season, and perhaps see that as maybe a reason for him to bide his time a bit more than perhaps anyone else would. But then there's on the other side is Chelsea are used to instant success, and having that winning mentality is something which Roman isn't really shy to make the most of, and with his hire and fire sort of policy. But again, it's one. I think at the end of the day, it's a result-based business, and who's to tell what the form is going to hold in the future and what decisions will be made. But anyway, enough of the sort of serious questions in a sense. Just before last couple of questions before handing over back to Pius, who will close it out. But this one's more of a light-hearted one, and I guess you're more of your opinion, Liam. in terms of the Premier League and the Champions League, obviously the Premier League this season is really open-ended, and it's hard to sort of predict where teams are going to finish, especially albeit in January as well. So it is not sort of like any other season. But who would you say are your favourites then for the Premier League title and the Champions League? Which teams would you, if you're a betting man, put your money on?
Well, I thought it would be. I think at the start of the season, I predicted Man City would win the league, purely because I thought Liverpool would have an inevitable emotional drop-off after winning the league the way they did last year, and I thought we'd begun to see that after they'd actually secured the title at the end of last season. But then City started this season so poorly that I was doubting myself immediately. But they looked really good at Stamford Bridge, and they've looked pretty good, particularly defensively actually for quite a while now. And they're actually nowhere near as far away as you would assume they might be, given how they started the season. So, they're 4 points off. I'm just looking at the table now. They're 4 points off Liverpool with 2 games in hand. So I think I'm happy to stick with my Man City prediction. I think with Liverpool's injuries, they're going to be a really good team. It's going to be between those two. I think they're clearly the 2 best teams in the league, despite Man United's recent run. But I just think City might be a little bit hungrier after not winning it last year. And then the Champions League, this is another one that I think could be absolutely wide open. It wasn't, if you think back to last year, it wasn't really until about a month or 2 before they played Chelsea that Bayern emerged as this absolute juggernaut and the best team in Europe. So it's really bad timing for Chelsea from that perspective. But they seem to be stuttering a little bit now. Maybe there's a bit of a hangover for them from what they achieved last year. I still think if they're locked in and playing their best, I think they are the best, most cohesive team in Europe. But City and Liverpool should be right there as well, especially if Pep Guardiola stops overthinking pretty routine Champions League knockout ties. I'm inclined to go with Bayern just because they've got the recent pedigree and they've still got all of their key players in their primes.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting to sort of, predict these two. It's hard as well. I mean, I personally think, it will be between Man City and Liverpool. I think United fans are getting gassed too much, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I think City and Liverpool are definitely the favourites for the Premier League. And Champions League, I think I agree with you as well. I think, if Bayern at it, I think they win it. But I think, you can have Liverpool up there, you can have City. I don't think Barca are really up there anymore at the moment. There's a few others, Juventus. I don't know. I think it's definitely between the ones you mentioned. So, Liam, anyway, before we wrap up the episode, we just want to get like a little bit more info quickly. What is it actually like to sort of do your job? Is it exciting? Is it sort of, obviously it's busy, but what is sort of the I guess you could say the sort of normal day for you? What does it involve? Because we spoke to Fabrizio Romano before about, obviously he does strictly transfers and stuff and meeting agents. So, quickly if you can, we'd like to get sort of a bit more information on what is it you actually do day to day.
Yeah, so I mean, this has all changed pretty significantly since the pandemic, obviously. But I did always work from home primarily, aside from going to press conferences and games. And the average day, I mean, since I started at The Athletic, I'll have a call with my editor in the morning. We'll kind of plan out, or at the start of the week, we'll plan out what we're trying to do for the week. The aim is to average 3 pieces each week, all at least 1,000 words. So a fair bit of work goes into them, and then sort of checking in every single day to try and make sure we're making progress on things. And aside from that, it's a lot of messages and phone calls. I mean, slightly different, I think, from Fabrizio, in that because he's so transfer focused, I'm sure a lot more of his stuff will be, WhatsApping people in football and agents for direct information. With me, there's obviously some of that because we're doing news as well, but I'm also reaching out to people and to clubs about, interviews and collaborations on pieces and things like that. So it's trying to keep as many plates spinning at any one time as possible, because even while you're working on the short-term stuff, you want to try and keep the ball rolling on some of the longer-term pieces we're working on, just to make sure that when you get to 2-3 weeks down the line, you're not chasing. But it's always that balance of trying to react to things that are happening in the moment, such as Lampard suddenly finding himself under pressure, and then longer term things that we're kind of planning around certain games or certain points in the schedule. And then of course I'll also try and look up. I mean, I do quite a few pieces looking at sort of stats and analytics around Chelsea's performances. So I'll try and see if I can spot any trends there that might be worthy of talking about as well.
Yeah, honestly, it sounds so interesting. Honestly, it's really I'm definitely jealous. It sounds great. Honestly, you put a lot of hard work in, and yeah, we really appreciate you and the Chelsea fan base. So thanks for coming on. And obviously, guys, if you want to have more about Liam's views, more stats, more inside info and stuff, then obviously you can go and subscribe to The Athletic, and obviously follow him on Twitter. He does post out when he posts things. So really, really great episode today, Liam. Thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything you'd like to end it out with?
You've asked me for like a Jerry Springer's final thought here. This is on the spot. No, I'm really intrigued to see the way the next couple of Premier League games go, because we know it's a high pressure time for Lampard. He also happens to have pretty much all of his attacking players fit now. I think it's pretty much the first time in the season that they've all been fit. So he's got more options than ever before, but also more decisions to make, and the decisions are arguably more important and consequential than they've ever been. So I'm really interested to see what Chelsea's team looks like in the next couple of days, and then of course whether those selections are justified by the performances.
Yeah, I'm very interested as well. Not only for Fulham, but the next few weeks. I think we've got quite a few difficult games, and obviously, we've got Fulham on Saturday now instead of Friday, and then we've got Leicester on Tuesday. So that's quite a quick turnaround. So going to be interesting to see how the squad and Lampard deals with this sort of period we're going to go through. So, very, very interested. So anyway, guys, thank you for listening. Sorry if we didn't basically get your questions answered by Liam, but we wanted to try and pick the best ones. So, we think we did that, and it was very, very good. So, yeah, Liam, we enjoyed having you on. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.